Last week, I said that we were essentially ending the story of Jacob, essentially because he does continue to factor in the book of Genesis. It's just not really about him anymore. It moves on to the next generation, the generation of his sons, and in particular to Joseph. And so that's who we're going to be looking at here today as we continue our series on the first book of the Bible. Joseph's life, what he went through, what he had to go through, if you're familiar with the story, then you know it was pretty horrible what he experienced. But through it, he learned the necessity and the importance of humility, the importance of trusting God when he did not know what was going on in his life, why it was happening, the darkest periods of his life. He leaned on the Lord in those and trusted him to provide the answers for why those things were going on. And answers have a lot to do with his story, and particularly with the dreams that are a part of his story. And so that is what we're going to be taking a look at today. And we're going to be starting in Genesis 37, so you can open your Bibles there before reading, before getting to the actual verse that we're going to focus on, just to, again, set the stage. At this point in his life, Joseph is 17 years old. And Joseph, at 17, he is well known for being Jacob's favorite son, that he is treated better than any of the rest of his brothers, his 10 older brothers, and it is mostly a result of the fact that he is Rachel's first son. And Rachel was Jacob's favorite wife, the one that he actually loved, the one that he had actually wanted to marry before he was tricked by Laban. And so he was closest to her, and as a result, he was therefore closest to Joseph. And then on top of that, Rachel had passed away not very long before this story takes place. She had died giving birth to Benjamin. And so Jacob was really, I would say, overly attached to Joseph, and it made his brothers, Jacob's older sons, 10 older sons, jealous, because they were concerned that that was going to mean that they probably weren't going to get the inheritance, that they were all going to be bypassed in favor of who Jacob would maybe treat as his most legitimate offspring. And that was pushing the buttons. That was creating a bad situation in this family that you would have thought Jacob would have known better than to start, considering his own experiences with favoritism in his youth. But in any case, he did this and sets the stage for what we find in Genesis 37, starting in verse 5. Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. He said to them, "Please hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Then behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And indeed, your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf." And his brothers said to him, "Shall you indeed reign over us, or shall you indeed have dominion over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Look, I have dreamed another dream. And this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me." So he told it to his father and his brothers. And his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you?" And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. There's something about this that might sound familiar to what occurred again in Jacob's experience as a younger man when it comes to this favoritism. It's the fact here that nobody comes off well. That even Joseph himself, who's considered one of the best examples in the Bible, he's not looking all that great here because of the pride that he has on display. It's understandable. He's 17. He's a kid. He doesn't really know any better. He's used to getting everything handed to him on a silver platter, and so he decides to lord it over his brothers and to say, "Hey, I've had these dreams. This means something really good's going to happen to me, and you're all going to be beneath me," right? He's pointing that out to them. And then you have the brothers who are already jealous. Now it's really ramping up because Joseph is coming after them directly. And then again, Jacob, he at least gives a light rebuke to Joseph, but he doesn't do anything. He doesn't actually put Joseph in his place. He doesn't do anything to confirm to his other sons that they're going to be provided for, that he does love them. And instead, you just have everything that's thrown into this cauldron in this family, and it is ready to boil over, and that's exactly what's going to happen. But as was the case with Jacob, in spite of all of this, God is still in control. He's the one who is working out his plan. And it's not easy to see in the moment for Joseph or for Jacob or for the brothers. But that is what is happening, because as we've been focused on in Genesis, God is the hero of this story. It's not the human beings in it who are the ultimate exemplars and the ones that we are ultimately relying upon. They do good and bad. We're supposed to learn from them either way, but it's God who we are always supposed to rely upon to give us the things that we need. And again, it doesn't happen immediately. Time is going to tell, but the next thing that happens is when Joseph is alone with his brothers out while they are watching their flocks, that they decide that they're going to kill him. And they're going to get him out of the way. They determine to do this, and the oldest brother, Reuben, talks them out of it. He's the only one who initially doesn't seem to have as much of a problem with Joseph, and he does not want him to die. And so he convinces them, well, let's not kill him outright. Let's throw him into a dry well and let nature do the job, basically, is what he tells them. But it's because he plans to come back later to rescue him and to send him home. It's not totally out of the kindness of his heart, though, because Reuben himself is in a situation where he is alienated from his father, and so he sees this as an opportunity to get back into his good graces. So he tells them to put Joseph in the well, and he goes away in order to make his preparations, and then another of the brothers, Judah, also apparently realizes, it's not right. We can't kill Joseph. We really shouldn't even leave him in this pit, Let's sell him. There was a caravan that was moving past, and so they decided, well, this is an opportunity. We can just get rid of him. We don't even have to really have his blood on our hands at all. We'll just let wherever he goes, that will take care of him, and we won't have this problem anymore. And so they sold Joseph, and Joseph winds up in slavery in Egypt. But in spite of the fact that he's stolen away from his home, that his brothers hate him, that he's become a slave, the intriguing thing that we are told in Scripture is it says that the Lord was with him. It's a strange thing to hear. How can you say that the Lord is with someone who's going through all of that? But Joseph was able to look for those signs, and that's the way that it is in life, is that God does not make everything all better all at once just because somebody belongs to him. He guides them through life for the purposes that he has in store for them. He was using this to refine Joseph, to make him suitable for what he had in store. And so there's a cloud over Jacob's life, but there's a silver lining to it at all times. And that's what this means, is that he is blessing Joseph even in his circumstances. Being a slave is not good, but he's finding good in spite of it. And as a result of seeing that, Joseph continues to maintain his hope, his faith in God, and so he behaves as God would want him to do. He takes his responsibilities seriously. He's industrious. He's virtuous. And because of that, he's recognized by his master, a man named Potiphar, who sees what Joseph is capable of. As a result, he basically makes Joseph his household manager. And so again, it's the best of a bad situation. It's not a good situation, but it's better than the worst that it could be. And this actually ends up being an example of Genesis 12, verse 3. That was the verse where God had promised to Abraham that he would be blessed, and through his family, everyone else would be blessed as well. That finds its ultimate fulfillment, of course, in the work of Jesus, in the salvation that he offers to everyone. But there are signposts to it along the way, and this is one of them. Potiphar is not part of that family, but Joseph is. Joseph is being blessed, even in the midst of this, and Potiphar is able to take advantage of that as well. He is able to be blessed through Joseph's blessing. And so this is the life that Joseph is living, where, yes, he's still a slave. He is not free to do everything that he would want to, because he would probably just go home. But he's making the most of that situation because of what God is providing for him. That goes on for a few years until things actually get worse. Because Potiphar's wife decides that she wants him for herself, that she wants to have an affair with him. She tries to convince Joseph to do this. He refuses because he knows that it's the wrong thing to do, that it is not what God would desire. And it's also not right to Potiphar, who has treated him, again, insofar as you can say this about someone who owns another person, but for the time was treating him relatively well. He knew that it was wrong, and so he refused. He did the right thing and got punished for it. Because Potiphar's wife, that lust turned to hatred. And she decided to accuse him of attacking her, and he ended up being thrown into prison, into a dungeon. So he's gone from being a slave to being worse than a slave, to being a prisoner. But even so, Scripture still says that the Lord was with him. And again, it's just as difficult now, more difficult now, to understand how that can be the case, but it's the truth. That God is still looking out for him, giving him enough to see that there are reasons to hold on to him, to rely upon him. And so Joseph, once again, he accepts that, continues to live as God is guiding him to do, and he's seen doing it. And so the captain of the guard also recognizes the qualities that Joseph has and makes him an overseer of the other prisoners. So that's where we find him in Genesis chapter 40, is he's overseeing the prisoners, and there's two special prisoners who are brought into this dungeon with him, the butler and the baker of Pharaoh. We're not told exactly what they did to be thrown in there, but it seems to suggest that there was some type of attempt on Pharaoh's life, and a poisoning that must have been tried. And because of their positions, they were seen as being most likely to be responsible for it, and so until it could all be sorted out, they were both placed into the jail. So they're already pretty troubled by all of that, but there's a day that Joseph noticed that they're even worse off than usual, so he asks them about it, and that's what we find in Genesis chapter 40, starting in verse 8. They said to him, "We each have had a dream, and there is no interpreter of it." So Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell them to me, please." Then the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, "Behold, in my dream a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches. It was as though it budded, its blossoms shot forth, and its clusters brought forth ripe grapes. Then Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand." And Joseph said to him, "This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Now, within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your place. And you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand according to the former manner when you were his butler. But remember me when it is well with you, and please show kindness to me. Make mention of me to Pharaoh and get me out of this house, for indeed I was stolen away from the land of the Hebrews. And also I've done nothing here that they should put me into this dungeon." So what we have here, again, is another dream. Another situation where interpretation matters. There hadn't been an interpretation that was really necessary in the earlier ones that Joseph had because it was pretty obvious, or he was making it clear to his brothers that he was going to be in charge. But this one leaves some confusion. The butler has no idea what is being talked about here, and so he brings it to Joseph because Joseph says that interpretation belongs to God. And this is the important point here, is that before, Joseph had been living in pride. That was his problem. That was his contribution to the mess that existed in his family. Now, he doesn't offer anything of his own. He doesn't say, "I can interpret your dream." He says that God gives the answers. So bring them to him. If he wants you to know, then he'll let you know what this is all about. And I'm willing to hear from him to be able to share it with you. And that is what occurs here. Joseph is able to give that explanation, to say, you're going to get everything back. Your life is going to go back to normal. You don't have anything to worry about. Congratulations. While you're at it, would you mind letting somebody know that I am here? Because I should not be. It's another valuable lesson to take away from this whole episode. Because when I talk about the fact that Joseph was making the best of a bad situation, it can be easy to take that wrong. And that occasionally happens, where people will feel like that means that you shouldn't complain about anything and that you shouldn't be bothered by anything that's going on in your life. But no, that's not true either. We do suffer. We do have issues that cause us pain that we have to deal with. We shouldn't be resigned to those. When we have the opportunity to change them, we should take it. That's what Joseph does here. He pursues the possibility of making something better than what he has. But he is content in what he has. That again, he's making the most of it because he's trusting God to make the most of it. And he sees this as an opportunity from God. That's how he uses it. And that's what we have to have the balance of. We don't want to have a sense of envy of others, and we don't want to have a sense of entitlement from God, that if things are not going exactly our way, that we don't turn to God in our time of need. But we also don't want to go to the opposite extreme and just give up on life entirely, because that's not acting in faith in God either. We have to walk that narrower middle road of recognizing, yes, this world is not always good, but God is always good. And he's going to make sure that we have what we require. He's going to give us the answers. So the baker, or rather, I'm going to return to the butler first. He gets this good news, and he doesn't actually do anything with it. He does get released, but he doesn't say anything to Pharaoh. The Bible says that he forgot Joseph. And the question there is, did he actually forget Joseph? That seems unlikely. I mean, it's not impossible that just the psychological torment of what he went through, he just buried it in his mind and didn't think about it at all. But it's more likely that he didn't want to rock the boat, because to change the metaphor, he was already on thin ice with Pharaoh, that he didn't want to say anything to Pharaoh that would maybe get him in trouble and get him sent right back to that dungeon. So he wasn't going to do anything at all. And he did forget about Joseph. Now, the reason why the baker doesn't have anything to do with this is because he told Joseph his dream too, but didn't get as good of an answer. He was told that he was going to be held responsible for the attempt that was made on Pharaoh, and he wound up being executed for it. But it was exactly as Joseph had said. He had been the one through whom God provided those answers, just wasn't anybody there to really appreciate it properly. The baker was gone. The butler forgot him. Everyone forgot him except for God. God was still the one who knew what he had in store for Joseph and was setting the stage to provide it for him, which is what we find finally in Genesis chapter 41. In Genesis 41, starting in verse 1, it says, "It came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh had a dream. And behold, he stood by the river. Suddenly there came up out of the river 7 cows, fine-looking and fat, and they fed in the meadow. And then behold, 7 other cows came up after them out of the river, ugly and gaunt, and stood by the other cows on the bank of the river. And the ugly and gaunt cows ate up the 7 fine-looking and fat cows. So Pharaoh awoke. He slept and dreamed a second time, and suddenly 7 heads of grain came up on one stalk, plump and good. And then behold, 7 thin heads, blighted by the east wind, sprang up after them. And the 7 thin heads devoured the 7 plump heads and full heads. So Pharaoh awoke, and indeed it was a dream. Now it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled. And he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. And Pharaoh told them his dreams, but there was no one who could interpret them for Pharaoh. Then the chief butler spoke to Pharaoh, saying, I remember my faults this day. When Pharaoh was angry with his servants and put me in the custody in the house of the captain of the guard, both me and the chief baker, we each had a dream in one night, he and I. Each of us dreamed according to the interpretation of his own dream, and there was a young Hebrew man with us there, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him, and he interpreted our dreams for us. To each man he interpreted according to his own dream. And it came to pass, just as he interpreted for us, so it happened. He restored me to my office, and he hanged him. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him quickly out of the dungeon. And he shaved, changed his clothing, and came to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that you can understand a dream to interpret it. So Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace. The last set of dreams that we have in this story is definitely the weirdest of all. It's just bizarre. Cows don't eat other cows. Heads of grain don't eat anything. But here that's what's happened, and even stranger than that, you have the thin, ugly, blasted ones that are doing this to the healthy ones. And so, of course, Pharaoh doesn't know what to make of that, and because it's essentially repeated, it's pretty similar dreams that these two, one to another, and so it sticks with him. Dreams don't always do that, but these ones do. He cannot shake whatever it is that's being shown to him here. And so he brings it to the attention of the people who are supposed to be experts in this, to the wise men and the magicians who are supposed to understand what dreams could possibly mean. But none of them have the answers. It's only then that the butler remembers. It's only then that he's willing to pipe up and say, hey, remember when you threw me in jail? Yeah, great times. There was a guy who helped me out there because I had a dream and he was able to tell me what it meant. Maybe he'll be able to help now as well. And so Joseph is brought out. Joseph is brought forward to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh asks him, can you tell me what my dream means? And Joseph says, no. And I don't know if he paused like I did a little bit, but I kind of hope so, because I just like imagining what the look on Pharaoh's face must have been like, and the disappointment and the frustration that probably would have been mixed in there for half a second, and also the face of shock that the butler almost certainly had to be like, what are you doing to me? Why would you say no? But, of course, Joseph did pretty quickly explain what he was talking about. This is the high watermark of his humility being on display. Now, I don't have answers. There's nothing special about me. God has answers. If there is something that you need to know, then he will let you know. And if you tell me what the dreams are and he delivers that through me, that's great. But that is not about me, that's about him. And it goes along with what we are trying to do as a church here at Potter's, is that it's not we are clay jars. It's not about how impressive we are on the outside. It's about what God gives on the inside, that we rely upon him as the source of life and of wisdom. And so, Joseph, having explained that, Pharaoh tells him the dreams, and it's after that that God does, in fact, give the interpretation to Joseph. And that's what we find starting in verse 25, is Pharaoh said to Joseph, the dreams of Pharaoh are one. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads are 7 years. The dreams are one. And the 7 thin and ugly cows which came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty heads blighted by the east wind are 7 years of famine. This is the thing which I have spoken to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. Indeed, 7 years of great plenty will come throughout all the land of Egypt. But after them 7 years of famine will arise, and all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine will deplete the land. So the plenty will not be known in the land because of the famine following, for it will be very severe. And the dream was repeated to Pharaoh twice, because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. Now therefore, let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land to collect 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt in the 7 plentiful years, and let them gather all the food of those good years that are coming, and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. Then that food shall be as a reserve for the land for the 7 years of famine which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land may not perish during the famine. So the advice was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find such a one as this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God? And Pharaoh said to Joseph, inasmuch as God has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall be ruled according to your word. Only in regard to the throne will I be greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. So Joseph is able to give God's answer and to say, well, what this means is that there's going to be a famine. And it's going to represent an existential crisis for Egypt, that the nation may not even survive as a result of what was probably going to be a disruption in the flood cycle of the Nile. But it wasn't going to start right away. You're going to have 7 years beforehand to prepare. And that's where he also, along with the interpretation, gives a plan for what can be done in order to avoid a disaster. To take 1/5 of the produce, 20%, it would be painful for those 7 years to take that much from people, but it would be what was necessary in order to set it aside against those not so rainy days that were going to be coming. and to leave something so that they could survive through the famine until things went back to normal. And so Joseph says this, and I figure the mindset is probably something along the lines of, okay, here's what you need to do. Find somebody who can do that. Now can I please go home? That's, I'm sure, what he is still thinking. But Pharaoh says, no, you can't go home because you need to be the one to put this into place. And that comes as something of a shock in the account. When we come to here, it seems strange. Why would Pharaoh do this? Why would he take this person who, he's only 30 years old at this point. There's 13 years that have passed with him as a slave in Egypt. And why would he take this person who is this young and has done nothing else and make him into the second most powerful person in the most powerful nation in the world at that time? We do need to be able to understand, first of all, that he would have checked up on Joseph, that he would have gone to the head of the guard, and he would have gone to Potiphar, or rather had both of them come to him, he's Pharaoh, and say, what did this guy do for you? What do you know about him? And would have learned his capabilities, that he had already displayed them to some extent. But the thing that Pharaoh says that is the most important deciding factor is that, again, God is with him. That's been what it is throughout. The Lord is with Joseph. It is evident in his life, even with everything that he has gone through in his life. It stands out to Pharaoh, it stands out to that entire court, and it has resulted in something favorable because he's been able to give an answer where nobody else was. He's able to provide a solution where nobody else could even begin to. Because of that, that's why Pharaoh knows he's the right person for the job. So it's Genesis 12:3 at work again. Joseph has been blessed with this. And so now others are going to be blessed as well. And he's elevated. Considering the depths that he had fallen to, his elevation is an absolute miracle. It does go to show exactly what the point is, that there was nothing that Joseph could do to make this happen. But it was God who had established it. He has been the one to bring about this result. And it does still have to do with Joseph. It's his model that we do want to put into practice in our lives, because he was faithful for both of what the aspects of what faithfulness means. That he had faith in God, and he was also obedient to God. He did that, and that's why he was able to be in position to take this up when the time came. And we want to be the same way, but it is ultimately about recognizing that it's God's plan. And it's not just for Joseph. You know, definitely, we look at his story and it's no longer a silver lining. The clouds have completely broken and the sun is shining on his life, but not just for him. And that had been part of the reason why it had taken so long. Now, we're going to see more of this next week, but even now, we can see that what God is doing is not just providing for Joseph, he's providing for all of Egypt. And that everything has gone through has refined him and has had the time come about where he is ready to be there for them in their time of need. Which means that God is there for them in their time of need. And that's ultimately the most valuable thing in the story of Joseph. He's valuable to us because we can be like him and we can be faithful like he was, because he is just a man, a human being like the rest of us. But he's also pointing to a greater example, because there would be another beloved son who would also come down from the greatest heights, who would fall, in a sense you could call it, who would be humiliated more than anyone else ever was. But in his humiliation, in his death, would rise and be vindicated, and be glorified. And in that glory would offer salvation not just to a single country, but to everyone in the world who has faith in him. Is that Joseph's story points us to Christ. That's the highest value of it, is seeing that this is the way that God works. Is that out of the very darkest moment, he brings light, provides the answers, and wipes away the mystery and the suffering in order to bring about salvation. And that can be so hard for some people to believe. And it is understandable. We go through great struggles. We have suffering. And it blinds us to that truth. But it can be helpful to have these examples, to know that there's really not going to be that many of us who are going to struggle like Joseph did. And there's none of us who goes through what Jesus did. And when we see what was accomplished in their lives, it doesn't make our suffering go away, but it should encourage us. It should strengthen us not to give up on God. Because like we talked about last week, if we hang on to Him, He will come through. We may not understand what is going on with us right now. We may not see how He's going to do it. But we have to be able to believe that He is not without a plan. We have to have humility to see Him accomplish it. And so for anyone here or listening for whom that has never really come through, but maybe you're getting a new understanding of it now, I hope that you are. That if you've never believed in Christ, that you're seeing the importance of having faith in God and recognizing that you don't have the answers for yourself. And what is going on in your life, you cannot overcome on your own. So you can look at someone like Joseph and to see, for everything that he went through, God was the one who lifted him to greater heights. And that you can also see that Jesus, He lowered Himself to the point of being one of us, to die for you, so that in His resurrection, you can have life through Him. That is what is available. That is what matters more than anything else in this world. That is what God has done. That is what you must rely upon. So let go of whatever pride you have and realize that you need to come to Him for the answers. For those of you who have done that, for the Christians who are listening, again, I don't want to make it like God makes our life a bed of roses or present that to people. We know better than that. Things do go wrong here. That's not the point, that God makes everything go our way. The point is that He is in control. So remember that. And then be looking for the light that He's giving, whatever form it might be taking. Whether it is just a silver lining or whether the sun really is shining on you right now, whatever situation that you are in, just give God the glory for the good that He is still putting on display. And then as you do that, show that to others. Because they have questions too. They do have things that they don't understand. You need to be there for them to show them that God has the answers that they need.